Tantor Audio, a division of recorded books, presents The 100 Years' War, A People's History, by David Green, narrated by Michael Page. A note on money. During the 100 Years' War, financial transactions might be conducted in money of account, a conventional measure of value, or money of payment, i.e. the coins in which payment was actually made. In England, the mark was a unit of account worth 2/3 of a pound, 13 shillings 4 pence. The main coins in circulation were made of gold, silver, or billion, silver-copper alloy. They included the silver penny, the shilling, worth 12 pennies, and the pound, worth 20 shillings or 240 pennies. In 1344, the gold noble was introduced, valued at 6 shillings 8 pennies. The French unit of account, the livre, was worth 20 sous, each with the value of 12 deniers. The value of the livre depended on its place of origin, Tours, Bordeaux, or Paris, and on levels of devaluation. The sum of £1 sterling was usually valued as 5 to 6 livres tournois, 5 to 6 livres bordelais, 4 to 5 livres parisis. The main coins in circulation in France were the silver gros, worth 1 sou parisis, and the gold franc d'or, worth 1 livre tournois, which was gradually replaced by the écu d'or. There were approximately 9 écus d'or to the pound. The English administration in northern France in the 15th century also minted the salut d'or, which had a similar value. The French mouton, worth 4 shillings 10 pennies, was first produced in 1355. The Castilian unit of account was the maravedí, comprising 10 pennies dineros. The sum of £1 sterling was worth about 230 maravedís. The main Castilian coins in circulation were the real and the gold doblas, worth about 4 shillings. The other major coin in circulation in Europe was the gold florin of Florence, worth about 4 shillings sterling. A note on names. The French spelling of personal names has been retained unless they are particularly familiar in their English form, for example, Joan of Arc and Margaret of Anjou. Introduction, 1337. There were these two powers, the one before the other, always injuring and harassing each other in all the ways they could. But at the last the English and Gascons asked for favourable terms, and the Gascons took an oath to never rise or rebel against the crown of France, and to recognise and affirm that the King of France was their sovereign lord, and to remain his true and obedient subjects. This agreement was made in the year 1453. Jean Chartier, Chronique de Charles VII. The world did not shift on its axis when the 100 Years' War ended in 1453. When Bordeaux fell to the forces of King Charles VII on 19 October, no one knew that the 100 Years' War was over. Indeed, no one knew that England and France had been fighting the 100 Years' War. The struggle was first described as such in 1855, but the 116 years between 1337, when Philippe VI, the first Valois king, confiscated Gascony from Edward III, and the Dutch's final capitulation, brought fundamental changes both to the kingdoms of England and France and to the lives of their people. The reach of government, the role of the monarch, the place of the church, the relationships between rich and poor, noble and ignoble, and the very identities of both nations were refashioned by more than a century of war with the ancient enemy. This book offers a fresh perspective on a period of vital, vibrant, brutal change. The crucible of war forged and reforged the English and French nations into something new. It redefined the loyalties and links of individuals to one another, their internal organization, and their place in a widening world. The 100 Years' War brought about a revolution that fundamentally changed the character of military conduct and organization. It led to the professionalization of warfare, resulted in the decline of chivalric cavalry and the rise of infantry and artillery. The war forced the peasantry into a new role, As both victims and perpetrators of violence, peasants were battered and brutalized by the conflict, but they also emerged stronger despite their terrible experience. The church and clergy, too, were compelled to adapt to new circumstances, shaped as they were by political conflict and riven by disputes among the ecclesiastical hierarchy, but also galvanized by a period of intense spirituality. The war reshaped political and personal priorities, driving some individuals to remarkable lengths in search of a resolution to the struggle, whereas others fanned the flames of the conflict, drawn to it, lured by the promise of riches, booty, and ransoms. The diverse experiences of occupation and the conditions endured by prisoners of war and women reflect many of these changes, both in the wider population and in distinct groups brought into being by the grinding pressure of endemic warfare. Many were assaulted and abused, others treated with care and consideration. This is not a narrative history of the 100 Years' War. Rather, it explores the impact of the conflict on those groups and individuals who fought in a struggle that redefined the peoples of England and France and the nations in which they lived. The war has been a natural subject for writers and scholars since it began. Indeed, historians, lawyers, and chroniclers battled for supremacy on the page even while the armies of England and France fought bloodier battles at Crécy and Agincourt, before the walls of Orléans and amid the gunsmoke of Castile. The propaganda of the later Middle Ages would first give way to new origin myths centered on individuals such as Edward III, Charles V, the Black Prince, Bertrand du Guesclin, Henry V, and Joan of Arc, and later to new historical realities colored by the experience of revolution and world war. In recent years, the 100 Years' War has lost some of its political resonance, but it has instead emerged at the center of a wealth of scholarship. This book draws that scholarship together in a new way. It seeks to show the human cost of war within a framework of institutional change and in the context of a struggle that propelled France and England into a new phase of development, perhaps into a new age. It is usually said that the 100 Years' War finally came to a halt at the Battle of Castile, 17 July 1453, although the surrender of Bordeaux 3 months later, on 19 October, offers a more pleasing symmetry. The Duchy of Gascony had been at the center of Anglo-French hostilities since it first came under English control in 1152. It is usually said that, in many ways, little changed thereafter. Edward IV would lead an army to France in 1475, and Henry VIII followed his example across the Channel to win his spurs in 1513. Calais, the last English bastion in France, did not fall until 1558. And even then, England and France remained at each other's throats in wars throughout Europe and across the globe until at least the Entente Cordiale of 1904. As Charles de Gaulle would say in 1962, our greatest hereditary enemy was not Germany, it was England. From the 100 Years' War to Fashoda, she hardly ceased to struggle against us. She is not naturally inclined to wish us well. However, the wars that followed the fall of English Bordeaux differed in character and, until the Napoleonic era, in intensity from those that went before. Different, too, were the aspirations and objectives of the main protagonists. English and British monarchs may have continued to claim they were also rightful kings of France until 1801, by which time the Revolution had seen to it that there was no throne left for them to claim, but this was not a serious or realistic objective. More importantly, the political ambitions of both sides took on very different dimensions in the immediate aftermath of the 100 Years' War. In France, Valois power was finally free to extend throughout the natural geographical area of the country. In England, by contrast, the humiliation in France led, after civil war, to a complete re-evaluation of the nation's role and place in Europe and a widening world. The 100 Years' War, then, ended in 1453. Where it began is a rather more vexed question. The roots of this tree of battles were many, varied, and complex. They can be traced to Gascony, Normandy, and elsewhere in France, to England and Scotland. Once the conflict gathered momentum, it drew energy from Crécy
Sample complete. Ready to continue?